This roof had been surviving on patch jobs every time it leaked. If snow had piled up on it, it could have come down at any time. It was dangerous work, but we still managed to tear the whole roof off cleanly in a single day. This time, having that low-slope main roof right next to us gave us a wide work area, and that helped a lot. That said, this roof over here is pretty rusty too. We are sending the materials up in a 3-man relay. One more guy would make this a whole lot easier. Looking at the work still ahead, I would not mind a little more manpower. Let me quickly explain how this job even got to this point. This roof is on the back side of a house that sits deep inside a narrow lot and has been added onto over the years. The homeowner is elderly, and this upstairs room is not used on a daily basis, so the decision just kept getting pushed back. And with the houses packed in this tightly, I can see why a full re-roof felt hard to commit to. The neighbor's tile roof looks so fragile, it felt like it could crack just from walking on it. This side here is the shop parking lot, and the only spot that looked like it might take scaffolding was the neighbor's garage roof, freshly painted just last year. There was no parking space on the property, and the road out front is narrow with steady traffic. Right when it started to feel like we had run out of options, the neighbor let us set scaffolding on top of the garage and use one customer parking space. That is how this short, all-out roof job got started. This roof had been leaking for a long time, and then just like that, it was stripped down. From here, it starts coming back to life. While I handle the setup, I cut the rafters and sheathing and pass them up to Shimizu on the roof. Meanwhile, Shimizu just keeps the work moving. I set these rafters off the existing layout, splitting them from the roof center line at 1 shaku spacing. On a remodel roof like this, with twist and distortion, the idea is to balance the whole thing as I go. I am watching the whole job, reading the situation, and calling it as we go. How the work turns out, and how the site is run, that all comes back to me. These rafters are 45mm square. I am not trying to overbuild it, but it still needs the strength to do its job. This roof is over 50 years old. I am not going overboard here. The goal is to stop the leaks for good and make it safe to live under again. The scaffold they somehow managed to build for us under these conditions looks like a Sasuke obstacle course. And I am crawling through those scaffold pipes the whole time, just to keep the job moving. It is physically exhausting, of course, but it also eats away at your focus and judgment. Driving screws in a bad body position, with nowhere to brace yourself, is no joke. At the eaves, gable edges, and ridge, I screw the rafters in. Everywhere else, I nailed him off. I cut all the rafter tails together and that line comes out clean. Next, I move on to the barge boards. This time, I use barge boards made by shaping hinoki studs on site. Originally, I was going to use a sub-barge board and have the sheet metal roofer wrap it later, but the work was too awkward and too dangerous, so I switched to a narrow, exposed finish in solid wood. The ridge beam, purlins and beams are all badly warped. Some of the purlin ends were rotten too. So I read the overall balance, set the angles by feel, and fit the barge boards in place. On a remodel like this, if I chase perfect in every single spot, the job stops moving. A lot of it comes down to experience and instinct, making the whole thing work in the end. Now I have to put the barge board on the other danger zone too. The two of us work together to get it in place, but the scaffold is too unstable for both of us to stand there at once. By the way, this side is pressed right up against the neighboring house, so you cannot see it from outside at all. So the only ones who will ever see how clean this turned out are the YouTube viewers. And maybe a stray cat. Only the very last rafter is dropping sharply. Even with a veteran carpenter here, the key decisions still have to come from me. On this job, the second purlin was high, the beam below it dropped suddenly, and the rafters themselves were bowed from knots in the lumber. if I attach the materials without thinking it through, it comes back to bite me later. Because I set a straight barge board against rafters, riding slightly high over the purlin, I split the difference and ended up with a slight step. First, I nail the barge board to the rafters, then I fine-tune it from the rafter side with screws to keep the line straight. On a remodel, even the order I install things in can change how the finished work turns out. Now then, next comes the hirokomai trim. This hirokomai was actually made by ripping down 15mm solid pre-finished flooring.
はい。
This clean-looking hirokomai will get wrapped in sheet metal later, so none of it will be visible. The reason for the gloves was to keep hand grime off the wood as much as possible. But give it a year and the west sun will probably turn this barge board black anyway. Since wind-driven rain hits the eaves and makes them prone to rot, I avoid plywood there whenever I can. Some rafters stick out just slightly past the barge board, which would leave a step. So I shave a little off the back side of the hirokomai, where it hits those high spots, using a circular saw. When Shimizu is here, somehow it always works out.
Hi, お願いします。引き割って。みんなことでこらえててくれてな。
Next, I install closure blocks between the rafters. These close off the openings between the rafters at the eaves. They help keep out rain, dust, birds, and small animals. The nail pattern is not symmetrical, and that does bother me a little. But it is fine. The only ones who will ever see it are the neighbor if he climbs up on the roof. Or a stray cat. At this point, the rafters and trim pieces are all in place. Now I start laying the roof sheathing. This time, I am not closing in the soffit, so the underside of the eaves will show the rafters. Ideally, I would use clean solid boards here, but this time I am sheathing it with softwood plywood. So for the gable edge and the exposed eaves underside, I choose the cleanest looking sheets with the fewest knots. We have a problem. The roof deck framing is not square. On remodel work, a certain amount of distortion is not unusual. Over one row, 910mm, the roof is out by about 9mm. If I fine-tune the rafter center lines, I can still catch nails, so I keep going. At this level, I could still cut the sheets square and get away with it. But this time, I cut them on an angle and lay the sheathing that way. One side of the roof is finished. And then another problem shows up. The plywood joint does not land on the rafter center line at all. So I decide to lay the plywood from above. This time, it's not just 9mm. It's off by more than 45mm. Thinking back, that was the odd feeling I had from the start. I set the rafters correctly, splitting from the house center line, but that worked against me here. At that point, all I could do was keep moving forward.
こうしてもおかしいやろ。ちょっと待って、釘抜いたるわ。清水さん、これリャンコやめてさ、この2本だけ抜いて合わせて、たるきだけ振ろうか。うん、そうしようか。
so I decide to move only the rafters that fall under the plywood joint.
Cube.
Cube jump. 275で上が283。はい。
こんな傾けて切ったことない。
これは絶対合うもんね。
踏んでも合わんじゃん。なんとかなる。
Remodel work does not follow the textbook. It is a small roof, but the warp and slope changes took time to sort out. And before I knew it, the day was getting late. The skew keeps getting
だ
worse.
んだん広がってくるね。
The roof deck framing is finally complete. No time to rest. Next, I lay the roofing underlayment. By then, I was completely wiped out. Even so, Shimizu's stamina is on another level. At the valley, where water concentrates, I turn the asphalt underlayment up
これ
carefully.
振っといて、ペラッと上げてパチパチってして。
かぶり尺でいい。
ああ、いいよ。じゃあ、こんな全部かぶっていいよ。
4時33分終わりました。もやとか小屋塚が倒れたまんま家を作ったもんで、それを修正することができなくて、平行四辺形の屋根ができちゃいましたけども、なんとか、終わりました。はい、これでね、おばあちゃんも安心して住めると思います。
Then the sheet metal roofer came in to install the roof panels. He also finished the valley beautifully in sheet metal. This small wall section is prone to leaks, so I decide to cover it with galvanized steel from the outside. And some of you may have noticed, the roof we used as our work platform was rusted out too. If that roof started leaking next, and I had to build scaffolding all over again, I would rather not. This was an added job where the homeowner basically said any paint would be fine, but after coating the whole roof with rust-inhibiting primer, I decided to use some heat-reflective paint we already had in stock.
Stop.
偉いわ。やっぱりこうやって塗ってみると塗装屋さんも大変だわ。
大変やね。
うん。やっぱプロやわ。毎日やってる人は。
We were already running a paint job at another site and had our actual painter tied up over there. So even though roof painting is not really my main trade, I used the gaps in my schedule to do it myself. It looked like the paint might come up just a little short, so I finished this roof in moss green. Both roofs got a full 3 coats. This was a roof that had survived for years on nothing but temporary fixes. It took a long time to even get this work started. But once it did, it was over in a flash. With repair work, the result depends on who takes it on. Sometimes skill alone is not enough. What stopped this leak was refusing to give up and continuing to face the reality of the job head on. The homeowner probably has no idea. This roof ended up in moss green, silver black, and wine red. Then again, nobody can see it anyway. At least now they can live here without worrying. Please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.